Hello everyone, and welcome back to another R tutorial video. And in this video I want to talk about legends. Now, as you may remember, with ggplot2 we saw that the legends came in sort of by default, but with base R there was no legend. And what I want to spend this video doing is getting base R caught up to ggplot in terms of just being able to add a generic legend that matches the aesthetics that we set up in terms of color, shape, and size. So what I've done is I've copied over the R code from the colors video where we generated a base R that used different colors for the different species. And I think this is a great example of how the legends in base R are constructed. And it shows some of the sort of nuances and one of the reasons why, again, I believe that ggplot is just easier to deal with. So what I want to do is I want to quickly run these two lines of code just to make sure that we have everything we need here. And again, if you don't have this code in front of you, just pause it and retype it out if you're following along. Otherwise, just trust me that this came from the color video, and if you're curious how we generated this, you can always go back and watch that video as well. But what I want to do is I want to just quickly generate the plot again, and I want to show you what it looks like. So we know, right, because we've specified here that we were coloring this based on species. But the problem is we have no idea what color went to what species, at least not directly. Right? We could look up the colors in the data frame, but that's hexadecimal and that's not particularly useful. Right? But a legend would be extremely useful here. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to use a separate function called legend. And what legend does is it will put a legend in the most previous plot call. So in this case, this legend would be for this plot here. Now, I want to make clear as we go through this that you're going to be doing a lot of matching between what we called in the plot and what we call in the legend, and you're going to see that we have to actually be very explicit in what we put in the legend. So what I want to do first is I want to just give the legend the base number of parameters that it needs to not crash. And those two parameters are x and legend. Right? If you give the legend function x and legend, it will at least not crash. Now, it's not going to be useful, as we'll see in a second, but at least it won't crash. So what the x parameter is the x parameter accounts for where we want the legend to go. Now, I should say here, it is possible to do an x and a y and give it like a Cartesian coordinate, but I find it's generally most useful to just specify using sort of English, something like top, right? And there's a whole list of these sort of keywords that it will recognize. So if I put top right, it's going to add a legend in the top right-hand corner of the plot. Now, the next thing is legend. So legend is the category titles. So in this case, it would be Setosa, Virginica, and Versicolor, right? The three species that we are interested in. And we can access that by using the levels function, which returns the different levels of a factor variable. And this factor variable is the species that we use to base the colors on. So if we do df $species. So if I run this command, and then I have to actually rerun the plot command and then run the legend again, you'll see that we've added a legend in the upper right-hand corner. But what you might also notice is that it's literally just the names of the species, right? It has no tie-in to anything on the plot. So in order to do that, what you have to do is you have to start to add in those same parameters that we used in the plot call. Right? In specific, we have to use the call command because we have to tell it what colors to assign. And we have to pass in the same 3 colors that we used for the species. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to call levels because I want to pass in the different color options. To get just the color options, I'm going to do factor, and I'm going to pass in the color options. All right. So just to unpack this here, factor df $color is going to pull out the unique color options as a factor, and then levels is going to return those in a way that this can understand. So if we run this, and then we run this, oops, I have to call the plot, sorry. We recall the plot, and then we call the legend. You might be saying to yourself, well, what happened? Nothing changed. And that's because there's one additional legend parameter that if we had set it in plot, you would immediately think about. But we sort of use the default here. And that is the PCH parameter. So if I do that, comma PCH, and you'll remember when we talked about the shape in the shape video that the base R uses the PCH1 as its default. So if I run this now, and then I recall the plot, and then I recall the legend, you'll see that now we actually have what matches. We have the green, purple, and orange semi-filled circles. And this PCH equals 1 is something that trips a lot of people up when they're first dealing with legends, because you kept the default in here, but you still had to specify it in here. And that's why oftentimes I think it's a little bit better in terms just of practice to specify your PCH, even if you want the default, just to specify it. That way it sort of reminds you when you use the legend that, hey, I have to specify PCH here as well. So we're going to use for there, and then we're going to use a for there. So we're going to rerun the plot. So now we have the X's, and then we'll rerun the legend, rerun the plot, legend. So you'll see that now we have a legend looking kind of like what we would expect. So I know that was a lot. Hopefully it kind of made sense and you saw the sort of direct correlations between the parameters we passed into plot and the parameters that we passed into legend. Now, I will say this, there are a lot more parameters in legend than what I've gone through. And we'll talk about a couple of more of them in the next couple of videos, but by and large, this is about as complicated as I would expect your legends to get with base R. So hopefully this made sense. If you felt confused about anything, I encourage you to pause the video, go back, rewatch the parts you're confused about, and as always, please reach out. Thank you.